Story time about the guy who pretended to be gay in high school to get closer to all the girls. So it was the first day of my freshman year, and at lunch this guy came and sat with me and my friends. And we were super confused because he was like one of the popular boys. And we were like, oh, why aren't you sitting with your friends? And he's like, oh, because ever since I came out as gay, they don't want to be friends with me anymore, and they're being super mean to me. So we felt really bad, and we started getting to know him, and he was actually a really cool person. So we started inviting him to our sleepovers and everything like that. And because he was gay, we felt really comfortable getting dressed around him, talking about things that we wouldn't talk about in front of anybody. So like 2 months go past, and at this point he knows so much about us, like stuff that nobody else knew. Like, he even knew that one of my friends was born with both private parts, which is something that she never told anybody except for me and the girls in my friend group. Well, we're all on FaceTime the one day, and my friend goes, oh, have you ever seen boobs before? And he goes, no. So we all lift up our shirt like for part 2. Okay, part 2 about the guy who pretended to be gay in high school to get closer to all the girls. So like I said, we all lift up our shirts, and because we were on FaceTime, we couldn't see if he screenshotted anything. And then the one night we were having a sleepover, and he was really upset that night because apparently the popular boys were making fun of him. Because the only reason why he was gay is because he couldn't get with any girls. So me and my friends thought of a solution, but like we were just trying to be nice. And now looking on it, that is the dumbest shit that we've ever done. And we're all like, oh, well, why don't you just say that you did the nasty with all of us? And he was like, well, I don't think they'll believe it, even if you guys said, yeah, you did do it. So we were like, okay, then let's do it for real. So that night, we did the nasty, all 5 of us. So that morning, we all wake up and he's literally gone. Like, he didn't wake us up to say goodbye, which wasn't normal. So the weekend goes past. Monday, we go to school. And in the morning, my friends and I have time to walk around, and everybody's just staring at us, like for part 3. Part 3 about the guy who pretended to be gay to get closer to all the girls. So, like I said, we got to school, and everybody's just looking at us. And all of a sudden, we get tagged in this Instagram account. And there's a video of all 5 of us doing the nasty in my bedroom. There's pictures of me and my friends getting undressed. And there's a screenshot of the FaceTime where we all showed our boobs. And under the post, he was exposing a bunch of shit about us. And my one best friend was literally crying so hard because everybody now knew that she was born with like both parts. And also after gym class, we would just tell him to come in the locker room, and the teacher didn't care because he was gay. So there were also a bunch of pictures of other girls on there too. I'm not even going to talk about the legal trouble, but my parents made me move schools because they cared about my image and they didn't want me hanging out with any of those friends anymore. He got expelled. The teacher got fired for that bullshit. So that just ruined having a gay best friend for me. Oh, also my parents saw me have a foursome in my bedroom.
Storytime of how I found out that I was dating my own brother. Yes, biological brother, same mom, same dad. So a little background information, my mom passed away when I was 2, my dad is currently in jail, and I live with my grandma. So at the time, I was 14, about to be 15, he was 17, about to be 18. So how this all started is one day I was at the baseball game with my friends, and he happened to be there. I was fangirling over this boy. Like, I saw him and I was like, I'm going to marry him one day. I was feeling a little bold, so I went over and got his snap. And then I figured out that he had the same last name as me, and I was like, dude, that is dope. My exact words were, now I don't have to change my last name when we get married. So we hung out the rest of the baseball game, and I was starting to fall in love with this kid. Like, his smile, his laugh, I talked about him to my friends the rest of the night, and me and him started snapping for a while. So we started to hang out a lot. We may have hooked up a couple times, but I had to keep this all secret from my grandma because she forbid I dated somebody. So fast forward a couple weeks, we start dating. Months and months and months go by. Our 9 months come, and I finally tell my grandma. And this is where it gets bad. I'm running out of time, like for part 2.
Storytime about my emotionally abusive ex-fiance and his psychotic family. So when I started college, I met this guy on Facebook. And I mean, he was a dreamboat. We hit it off immediately, and I knew that he lived in my hometown, even though I was out of state for college. And when I tell you this guy was sweet, I mean, he could put Nicholas Sparks novels to shame. While looking back, a lot of the stuff was cringy. He was my first relationship. Well, one day when we were on the phone, he was talking about how excited he was to be married one day and adopt animals together. I was totally excited about it with him, and he decided to propose on the phone, on the spot. He was like, please don't embarrass me. I'm down on one knee in front of everyone right now. And so I just said yes. Well, I thought this was the beginning of my happy ending. Things got worse. He became extremely obsessive and controlling. He would blow up my phone whenever I was in lectures and get a hold of the college admissions office when I wouldn't respond, and would yell at me if I fell asleep because he thought I was ignoring him. I would would literally wake up to text about him hurting himself or selling my nudes. I was so scared that he was actually going to do something crazy that I left school and started driving back to my hometown. Once I got there, I met his family and realized just how messed up everything was. You won't believe what happens next. Follow me on Insta in the meantime. Story time about my emotionally abusive ex-fiance and his psychotic family. So once I got to town, I was finally able to meet his family, and he told them that I went to an Ivy League school and got in only because I was autistic, which was just untrue. I immediately noticed that the relationship between his mom and him were completely off. They both had each other as their wallpaper on their phone, and she acted as if she had a crush on him. When we decided to introduce both of our families together, his mom told my mom that she's sad that I don't look more like her because she's beautiful, then proceeded to say that it's nice that her son spends so much time with me even though I'm homely looking. She was also a therapist and claimed that it was her job to manipulate people and control their minds. Yeah, I bet that's the person you want to see when you're down. Because my boyfriend was in the military when he went back overseas, I was pretty much forced to be on Skype with him 24/7. It didn't matter where I was, and if I didn't respond, he would post horrible things about me on Facebook. Or he would send me videos of cats or puppies getting eaten by snakes to get back at me. I didn't watch them because they were so upsetting, but I was still too scared to leave him, and I was entirely sleep deprived. Stay tuned for what's next and follow me on Instagram. Story time about my emotionally abusive ex and his psychotic family. So I was still not prepared to leave him and had to be on Skype with him all the time. In the bathroom or in the shower. If I refused and asked for privacy, he'd tell me how horrible and how ugly I was. And that he'd end his life because of my cruelty. The only time that I didn't have to talk with him was whenever I was hanging out with his mom. And when I did this, she would spend the entire time talking about him. She would tell stories about him and show me pictures, and in the pictures she took of him, he was either shirtless or sleeping. And the weirdest thing is that she said she taught her son how to be a good lover. Whatever that means. She would also frequently tell me that I was going to hell for having sex with him. And she only knew this because she would log into his messages and read them. She talked about my body all the time and tried to give me tips so I could be prettier. This went on for months until I eventually made the decision to break up with him, and I had to move in with a friend because he kept sending scary things to my house. He would send stuffed animals with their limbs or head removed. He would also send empty envelopes, probably just trying to get me to come outside. Not long after this, he sent his cousin to try to kidnap me. And he said that he was doing this all in the name of love. Thankfully, this is over now, but if you have a story you want to share, follow me on Insta.
Storytime of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man when I was 14, but most people from my country, it is called arranged marriage, and it happened to a lot of girls. My family was poor, but the guy I was marrying had a lot of money and promised to take care of me and my family. He also had a 6-year-old son, but he didn't like me. I had met him once before when my mother introduced him to us. She allowed me to stay with him alone. He was very touchy. He told me I was very beautiful and would spoil me because pretty girls like me deserve pretty things. After he left, I told my parents that I was scared to marry him and that I'll do more housework and I'll take care of my other little sisters. My father yelled at me and told me no. So the next week, I went throughout the whole wedding crying. My mom told me to stop because I was messing up my makeup. After we had got married, a couple months later, he grew very abusive. Part 2 will be up next. This is part 2 of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man and I was 14. So we got married and a couple months into the relationship, he became abusive. Whenever my food tasted nasty or something wasn't clean right, he called me a lazy wife and told me I was no good and he should have married someone else. His 6-year-old son had no respect for me. The little boy scratched me, would yell at me, throw stuff at me, and my husband wouldn't do anything about it. I would tell him that I didn't like how his son was treating me, and he stood up and tells me to stay in my place and tells me I'm just a bad mother. I'd cried every night, wishing I could go back home to my mother and father. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I found out I was pregnant. He was so happy about it, and for once, he treated me so sweet. He would cook for me, clean, and told his son to be nice because his little brother was in there. When we found out the baby was a girl, he got mad and walked out on me. Part 3 will be up next. This is part 3 of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man and I was 14. So my husband was excited that I was pregnant, but when he found out I was having a baby girl, he got very upset and walked out of the room. When we got home, he started treating me nasty again. He then started putting his hands on me. He was just very angry at me and never wanted to see his daughter. It took him 3 weeks before picking her up, but even then, he wanted nothing to do with her. As years went on, I became quiet and I wouldn't speak to him. I would just make sure our home was clean and the children were taken care of. He would just get upset with me that I wouldn't speak to him and accuse me of cheating. He claimed that I was sleeping with other men and that our daughter is probably not even his child. I never understood why, because I was always home because he didn't allow me to go out. But I soon realized he only accused me of cheating because he was cheating the entire time. Part 4 is coming up soon. This is part 4 of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man and I was 14. My husband would always accuse me of cheating, but I found out he only accused me because he was cheating on me the entire time. Ended up finding out because his son told me. And like I said earlier, his son never liked me in the first place. So when I had made him upset, he randomly said that's why my dad has a new woman. I was off about it, so I went to ask my husband about it, and he admitted to it. He was very blunt about it, and he told me it was because the lady tempted him. I believed him at the time, but as time grew on, I started to become very insecure. I'd do whatever he want, but it was never good enough because he still kept stepping out of our marriage. On my 19th birthday is when I realized I had to figure out a way for me and my daughter to leave him. He didn't even say happy birthday to me, and that was my husband. I had no money, I didn't own anything, but I took a chance, so I packed whatever I could, and I planned for me and my daughter to run away while he went to work. Part